Hi, everybody. Welcome to Randi Sands and the Mediumship Crew. And we've got an exciting night tonight because this is the third Monday of the month. So that means we review a spiritualist pioneer and Jack's misbehaving.
I forgot to turn my phone down when I got on the live. Sorry.
Jack's misbehaving. So tonight is Margery Crandon, which is going to be a lot of fun. I didn't realize how much fun until I really started looking into her, and it was quite interesting. And for those of you that find value in this content, you think somebody else would be interested, please send them to the YouTube channel under Randi Sands, and they can watch it later, or you can share it. You can share the link. So what I figured I would do, Stacy, is I'll give a little bit of background just to open the door, and then we'll just open it up and run with it wherever it goes. So Margery was also known as Mina, and she was born in 1888, and she died November 8th of 1941. Excuse me, Pearly Rose, go right now, out. Either get out or lay in your office. And she passed in Beacon Hill, Boston, Mass. She grew up in a farm, or on a farm in Ontario. And as a young woman, she moved to Boston, Mass, where she actually married a grocer by the name of Earl Rand. And they had a son together. Later on down the road, she met a well-known surgeon. With his last name was Crandon, which is how she became Crandon. She filed for divorce from Earl to marry Crandon. Now, this is kind of a scary thing. I just want to point this out. So, she was Mr. Crandon's third wife. Now, back in those days, you really didn't have divorce a whole lot. And in those days, people just kind of died. So, like, third wife, I don't know that I would have wanted to live in a house with him. I mean, that's a little spooky, right? So she went from the grocer's wife to the surgeon's wife. And at some point, she started to experience or experiment with seances. Some say it may have been to distract her husband from his morbid obsession with mortality, which is kind of interesting for a surgeon. She was a well-known psychic medium who claimed to channel her deceased brother, Walter Stinson. On June 23rd of 1924, her name was entered as a candidate for a prize offered by the Scientific American magazine for any medium that could demonstrate kinetic ability under scientific controls. So we're pretty straightforward so far. What I found interesting is that in the era where mediumship became popular, she was kind of sitting in a hot seat of controversy, as some investigators who studied her felt she had no genuine paranormal abilities. Many claimed her to be an outright fraud. But at the same time, she had people like Sherlock Holmes and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that touted her abilities, and others like Harry Houdini who didn't. So I have to say she was a bit colorful, and I can't wait to get into this a bit more, because my understanding is she also did seances in the nude, and she apparently threw herself into the laps of some male sitters and may have even been an alcoholic. So it's kind of interesting. So Stacy knows a whole lot more about her. This is just things that I've read. So Stacy, you want to take over?
Thank goodness we don't believe everything we read
Right?
on the internet. That's where I'll start first.
I was like, oh my.
Oh, too funny. Well, and obviously you can see her behind me. There she is. Margery, but you're right, Mina, that's her official name. She was born Mina. She actually got the name Margery from Mr. Bird, who was one of her followers and one of the authors of the scientific magazine, actually named her Margery. But yeah, we'll kind of go into, because I want to kind of set the scene a little bit. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to give you an array of a perspective for you to decide what your truth is. But she is one of the most studied, scientifically studied mediums ever to walk this earth plane, which is fascinating. However, she also got under the hook of Harry Houdini, and we'll talk a little bit about that too as we go on. I'm going to switch my screen so I don't cover her face anymore because, well, that's not very nice, isn't it? There we go. Perfect. I'll explain what's behind me in a little bit. So you're absolutely right. She was the third wife to Dr. Crandon. When she moved to Boston, she actually met Dr. Crandon years before she actually married him. She had to have a surgery. At the time, we think it was her appendix removed. And Dr. Crandon was looking into different ways to remove the appendix. Instead of going through the side, he went through the belly button. So Dr. Crandon himself was quite a character. Interesting though, I love how you brought up the fact of divorce. Because again, you're talking the early 20s. So you have the roaring 20s, and you have to think about the time. And spiritualists tend to be free thinkers. So we believed in divorce. We believed in same-sex marriages. We were really outside of the box pioneer movements, right? So I kind of find it funny that she divorced her husband. Actually, I don't find it funny. I think it's like, good for her. She ponied up. She got a doctor. Good job. From a grocer to a doctor.
Well, I don't know. One feeds you. The other one fixes you, but one feeds you.
Oh, too funny. But you have to think now. I'm just kind of trying to give you the timeline. So she's born in Canada. She moves to Boston. She gets a job, and she's always kind of been. She was known as a beauty of her time. She was a looker. She was an actress. She drove cabs. She did really just kind of off the wall side jobs. But was kind of like this free thinker. I think they were talking about her. I think I read an article about like she was the one in pantsuits and those roaring 20 dresses, where they shimmer and shake all over, that was kind of her style. And so she gets married to Dr. Crandon, who is, I don't even know, a dozen years older than her, at least, right? I don't even know for sure, but he was quite her senior. And his morbid curiosity of the afterlife was actually very much he kind of had friends in places that were already kind of looking into spiritualism, right? Like, so he was kind of a believer of the spiritualist movement. So the morbid curiosity was basically the communication between this and the spirit world. She had no idea what he was talking about. He just was kind of had friends who were doctors, other doctors, and they were having these, I would call them intellectual discussions about the afterlife. Does it exist? How do we prove it? All of these things. So he invites some of his friends over who are part of the movement, like are spiritualists, right? Believers. And he got fascinated with table tipping of the time. This is part of our conversation tonight is going to lead into physical mediumship, because there's actually two forms of mediumship, mental and physical. Most everybody is familiar with mental, bringing through somebody's loved one with identifying factors is mental mediumship, but there is such thing as physical mediumship, and physical mediumship used to be, and I think is starting to come back again to be the ultimate form of the continuity of life, the proof of the continuity of life. But we'll get into the scandals. Again, I'm not here to prove one way or the other. My thing is to give you a perspective and some places to research, and you come up with your own conclusion. So anyways, Dr. Crandon says, this is probably about 1923, so that you're talking 4 years after their marriage. He says, I'm going to bring some friends over, and we're going to sit with a table, because I've heard of this thing called table tipping. And it's where spirit actually moves the table back and forth to respond to yes or no questions, or to kind of move around the room in communication. So they all are sitting in this dark room, and I'm going to say they're all, I think there was probably 8 of them, because I think there was like 3 or 4 other couples that were invited. And they sat there in a seance in the dark, and nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. And they all took turns like putting their hands on the table, each one. And it finally gets to his wife, Margery, and all of a sudden the table just starts rocking back and forth, back and forth. And she's like, and she even makes a comment in the seance before she puts her hands on the table. Like, why all the long faces? Why is everything so serious? And she puts her hands on the table, and it starts moving around the room. And she's laughing. So she brings a lot of laughter into this room. And so it was actually through her husband that she actually started to sit and develop her mediumship. It wasn't necessarily something she necessarily wanted to do. Now, of course, she was young and attractive, so it didn't hurt to get a bunch of guys to come over and sit in a circle with her because she was cute, you know, like, but the thing is I kind of find it ironic that those are the things that you start to hear about her. Do you know what I mean? Because it is kind of that stereotypical, because you're a good looking girl and these are a bunch of old men, there's some sort of issue with that. I do find, again, my opinion. So you'll find I am partial to certain things. So anyways.
Well, I've got to tell you, I found it hysterical when I was reading all this on the internet. I was like, this is crazy. This can't all be exactly what it was, but I found it interesting. Once I saw that, you know, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was touting her, I was like, this can't all be the way it's written here.
So I'm going to give you a little backstory about Doyle and Houdini, because I need to set the scene for what's going on, because this is like prime time, 1923, 24, 22. You know, this is like the, mid 20s to the early 30s. Doyle is a huge advocate for spiritualism, huge. Like, he is telling everyone the wonderfulness of spiritualism and this proof of continuity of life. And he is, promoting and giving lectures and filling lecture halls, because he gave up writing, because he was the writer of Sherlock Holmes. He literally gave up writing to promote spiritualism, which was huge, right? For somebody that big. And originally, and here's where I say to you, because I'm not going to get into, I'll get into Houdini a little bit, but this is where I say do your research. Doyle and Houdini were friends first. Believe it or not, they were friends. They vacationed together. They traveled together. Houdini was open to this idea or this concept of continuous life, because his mother had passed to spirit and he was a mama's boy, and anything to communicate with his mom again. Doyle's own wife was also a practicing mental medium at the time, and gave Houdini what I would consider an excellent message from his mother to prove the continuity of life. But Houdini said, no, That can't be my mother because she did not speak English. She would have said it in whatever language she spoke. So he took the whole message and threw it out. So I think, and this is this is me just from the research I've done, it was, you know, you insult somebody's spouse, in comes friction, right?
That could be a problem.
Could be a little bit of one. So Houdini and Doyle ended up getting in this huge fight. And Houdini said, all of mediumship is a fake and it's a fraud, and I can prove it.
Oh.
And that's what turned Houdini on to this, I don't even know what to call it, witch hunt, you know, just a hunt against spiritualism in general. Things are falling. See, we're talking physical mediumship and things are going to start moving. Watch out.
Yeah.
So at this point, Doyle sees Margery. So going back to Margery Crandon, I'll get to Houdini in a minute, but I want to set the scene because, you know, Houdini and Doyle were friends first, and everything you read is Houdini has debunked spiritualism. And here's what I say: seek your own truth, find your own path. It's not that things couldn't be replicated as magic, right? You watch a disappearing hand, right? But some of these things, and we'll kind of talk about some of them as we get into the physical mediumship aspect, are almost impossible to recreate on a regular basis. So you have to come to your own conclusion in your own mind. But interesting enough, Houdini also recanted. Margery Crandon is the only one that Houdini recanted on his deathbed and said, you know what, not all of her I can't explain all of her mediumship on Houdini's deathbed. So look into, if you're interested in this, there's books written both ways that go against Margery and for Margery, but I say find your own opinion. So she starts sitting with her husband, tables are rocking, things are starting, and years ago, when Margery was a very young girl, she lost a brother named Walter in some sort of railroad accident. I can't remember exactly how, but he transitioned to spirit. So when she started developing mediumship, she went into full trance. So for some of you who might not know what that is, it's an altered state of consciousness where spirit will either use your voice box or create a voice box through physical mediumship, and have independent voice in the room. So not necessarily coming from Margery as a voice coming from the room. At first she was just doing trance, so it was her voice box being used, and her brother would speak through. And her brother was pretty brash of a character, let's just say. So the reason her seances were deemed crazy and fun and funky was because her brother would use, he had no filter really. So when he decided to talk about something, he just talked about it just the way he wanted to talk about it. And again, look at the time period. We're in the mid-20s, late 20s. I mean, women are starting to get independence, but not really, right? And, you know, women are supposed to be seen and not heard. And here's Margery bringing through her brother. So, you know, it was very interesting. And from there, she started to develop the physical mediumship. And physical mediumship is where a whole group of people see something with their physical senses. So either you hear it, you see it, you feel it, you touch it, you taste it, you smell it. However it comes in a seance, in a controlled circle. And so one of the things that they call, that you hear a lot in physical mediumship, is ectoplasm. Not to be considered with the green slime from Ghostbusters, but more of like a gastric gas-like substance. Nobody really truly knows what it is. It was actually Margery Crandon who allowed scientists to touch it and weigh it and try to get some sort of identification from it. But it's produced through a medium. So chemicals in the medium's body produce this kind of substance. I can't even explain it. That will either form sort of like a voice box, so direct voice can be heard, or like as you see behind me, if you can see the hand that kind of appeared right from her belly button, and that's said to be Walter's hand. Now, again, if you don't know about physical mediumship, that could be a whole topic one day, all the different ways that spirit can physically manifest itself. But
that would be a good topic.
Yeah. So that was happening. Bells were ringing, voices were talking, tables were moving, trumpets were flying. So it was really an active circle, energetically active, physically active, an active circle. And she would sit for all sorts of people, from scientists to the next door neighbor to the grocer to doctors. You know, she would just sit and Walter would produce physical mediumship with the use of Margery Crandon. Now, one of the things that ectoplasm gets a name for is some people believe, this is crazy, but anyways, some people believe that the medium, if they were a fraud, would swallow 2-3 yards of cheesecloth. So first of all, imagine 2 or 3 yards of cheesecloth. And then if you can imagine swallowing that, and then it would said, the scientists say they regurgitated it during the circle and it formed a hand. So how do you regurgitate? First of all, how do you swallow 3 yards of cheesecloth, then regurgitate it so it forms a hand? Like, I mean, let's use our common sense here sometimes. You know, like, it's just kind of not possible. So anyways, there are some great books. Margery is the name of a book that talks about documents, because of course her husband's a doctor. So things are documented. Every seance is documented practically, you know, or when science experiments were happening, it was all documented. So there's a book called Margery. That's a really great book, and it talks more about what was happening, what was documented. There is, her nickname was also called the Witch of East Lime Street, because she lived on, oh, there's a trumpet. Yeah. So, okay, so back to the ectoplasm. So ectoplasm forms out of the medium, and it comes out of orifices. I'm just going to leave it just like that. And it comes out of noses, mouths, ears, belly buttons, you name it. The ectoplasm comes out. It would actually create, if you could imagine, like a little gripper, right? Like like think of a vapor trail, right? And it grabs that trumpet, and it can either lift the trumpet up in the air. It can produce a voice that comes out of it. I actually think that somewhere you can find online a recording of Walter talking through a trumpet. It's just amazing. And they put her through, and here's the thing. Her attitude was like, I just don't care, in a way, which was a good attitude to have. So when she was like, the reason why, and I can't believe they say she showed up in lingerie, but I get it. She had to, because they didn't believe. This was just like when the Fox sisters were stripped down to their skivvies. To sit there and prove to these men that what they weren't doing was fraud, they actually showed up in clothes or took off clothes, were forced to take off clothes to prove that there was no type of, you know, I don't even know what could they have underneath their clothes?
Cheesecloth stuffed down their dress, corset thing.
Maybe, whatever.
In the shape of a hand.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe, who knows? But so I know that sometimes she would come in a robe and maybe like a silk, what do they call those slips? I don't know. I've never dressed like that. Thank God we don't have to dress like that. That'd be awful. But
Weren't those things called a petticoat or something?
something like that, I'm sure. I don't know. Pain and torture is what most of that looks like to me, but that's what I say. Anyways. So anyways, getting on to this, she's doing all of these different seances. All these people are starting to come and watch. Doyle is singing her praises. So much is happening in her circles. So much physical proof of the afterlife that, of course, scientists start getting interested. And this is where Mr. Byrd, who owned the Scientific American magazine, launched this big, I don't know, what would you call it? A contest? I'm going to call it an investigation to prove that any medium had any paranormal activity for $22,500. Now, let me set the stage again. She's married to a doctor. Money is not a priority for her, right? She's doing this literally for the science of it. So they get together, this group of people. It's actually called the American Society for Psychical Research. It actually still exists. They still study mediums. I don't know how active. There's a British one too. I think the British one is still really active. So they put her under test conditions. They give her different rooms. They give her, I think at the one time, one of the doctors was like taking her pulse and also kind of measuring this ectoplasm, this weight. So when this ectoplasm was produced, she actually weighed less than she did normally. She went under all of these studies and they were just about to deem her authentic. And then Houdini gets involved. And Houdini sits in one of her seances and on the way home to the hotel says it's all fake. And he goes, and I can prove it. And so this kind of, interesting. Now, this is so just my opinion because I've read so much about this. I actually think Houdini might have had a little thing for Margery, actually. And she probably said no. And he said, well, I'll prove to you, you big fake phony, and got upset. I don't know if that's the case, but if you read about Houdini and his side of it, and you read about Margery and her side of it, plus you have to remember, put all these people together. Like Doyle knows Houdini, Dr. Ryan knows Dr. Crandon, like all these people kind of know each other. And so it's kind of like all of us getting together and giving our, it's not like we're all strangers, so you kind of wonder if there could have been a little personal disagreement around the way or not. And she was never actually awarded the money. However, most people stood by her as a genuine medium. It really had no effect on her popularity. She kept having seances. People kept coming. Different scientists came from all over to study her. It is said, though, that when Houdini was on his deathbed, because, interesting enough, Walter, again, her brother, who comes through with no filter, predicted Houdini's death. And sure enough, he did die later that year. I think Houdini died, Halloween, October 31st, 1929, is when Houdini died.
Right. I think it was Halloween.
Does that sound right, Jack?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was at his castle one Halloween and he played all kinds of tricks on me. He was having a grand old time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Houdini?
So it has been said that on his deathbed, he recanted the fact that Margery was a complete fraud, because he said he couldn't understand. There was one situation, and this is why I think maybe a good discussion on physical mediumship might be something we look into doing, because physical mediumship absolutely, in my mind, 100% exists. Fraud 100% exists. What you need to do is educate yourself, experience it, and if you like it, love it, and if you don't, you shut up and say nothing, because that's what Grandma says. If you ain't got nothing nice to say, you say nothing at all. But so I believe 110% that physical mediumship can be genuine and has happened and will continue to happen when we have mediums dedicated to developing that mediumship, because it is not an easy way. It's not easy, it's not quick, it's not instant, it's not fast, and it takes a lot of work on the medium and on spirit's part. So anyways, he did say that, like, there's this in physical circles, some sit in dark, some sit in red. There's a huge debate about that too. Again, research, people. Don't just go to Wikipedia and read what Wikipedia says and believe it as truth. Do research, read books. There's tons and hundreds of books written about all of this kind of things, and read them from both perspectives, because like everything, there's always a little bit of truth in everything.
So in your opinion, do we not see a lot of physical mediumship because mediums don't develop that right now? Mediums aren't developing that type of mediumship.
I think there's a huge resurgence in it. However, it stays very intimate and small. Because I don't blame these physical mediums. Look at what she went through. Look what the Fox sisters went through. Look at what anybody who goes out into the public and declares that they're, that their medium has to go through.
Yeah.
And I think that, I know that there's research centers still studying this. So I know that there's physical mediums. I do think, though, Jack, like you said, some of it has time. There are people I know who have developed physical mediumship, and they have sat every week, once a week, for 14 years before anything actually happened.
And I've actually had some of them tell me that it's somewhat painful too.
That's kind of it. Yes and no. Like, I would love to have a discussion of that. It can be painful if done willy-nilly, because when ectoplasm comes from the body, it is a physical substance. And if you're sitting willy-nilly with a bunch of people and all of a sudden a hand forms and somebody goes, "Oh my gosh," and reaps out and grabs that, it's an extension of the medium. So if somebody reaches out and pinches you, it's gonna hurt, or the ectoplasm can retract back. And I've seen some mediums have like little scars or little sores from, maybe somebody touching when they weren't supposed to touch, or, I don't want to make it a scary thing. It's not a scary thing if you're educated. If you're uneducated, it can sound scary, it can sound harmful, and it can sound dark, but it's really not once you actually know and educate yourself on what's happening in that room. But so that's a big conversation to have. That's a big one. I mean, physical mediumship can come in so many different ways. In this case, you can see the hand that was produced. We call that materialization. So spirit actually materialized. Now, there's also been some rumors that some of it, so back to Houdini, you can have trumpets in the room. Trumpets can move around. Sometimes people will have like little bells, and you can see or hear the bells like ringing and nobody holding them. For Margery, she had a bell in a box, and somehow Houdini said she did it with her foot. I'm not really sure how that all kind of worked out. And Houdini was able to recreate a contraption that kind of did that without, you know, anybody touching the box. Interesting enough, though, he had to recreate it. Do you know what I mean? He couldn't use her box and bell because he couldn't find the trickery in it. So he had to kind of create that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And, you know, there were some things like, for example, the hand, you know, manifesting itself that he couldn't recreate. You know, so it's always good. You know, you gotta, I always say it's good to be a healthy skeptic. It's always good to be a healthy skeptic. You should look. And Margery, you know, and here's where I have to say I give props. Margery was like, yeah, what do you want? You want to touch me beforehand? You want me to take my, again, she didn't have to do this. She was doing it to help prove the continuity of life. So what do you want to prod me and weigh me and check the room and touch the seats? And, you know, you should be able to kind of do all that. Right? Because they're doing it in a controlled environment. If you're all of a sudden like, here, Jack, let me stick you in this black box and just sit there and trust me. You're going to go, well, I don't know. Like, you know, I don't think so. You know, but you should be able to investigate the room, you know. And so anyways.
Only if there's, I can do that, but you only get the gummy bears if it goes okay.
Okay. If it goes off or something, then no, right?
And you don't get any gummy bears.
You get no gummy bears. I love it. I love it. Well, anyways. So
she say something.
What?
Yes. Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a physical medium, and a couple times, well, it catches me off guard sometimes. I was actually playing a part of an ancestor in the church that I belong to, Unity Church. And the lady would have been like 108 years old or something like that. But I dressed like her. I did my hair like her, like the pictures and everything. And I came out of the room dressed like that. And all of a sudden, the way that I was walking was totally different. And I could not step up onto the stage. There was something wrong with my hip that I couldn't get up onto the stage. And then when I finally did manage to get up there, I went to the podium and started talking, and my voice was not at all my voice. And nobody in the church knew who it was that was playing this part, because they actually thought the lady was there. But like I said, she would have been like 108 years old or something like that. And yeah, so a lot of times you don't plan on it, it just happens, you know. And I've been looking into doing more of the trance mediumship.
You know, it's interesting that you just said that, because there's been a few occasions where things like that have happened to me, and it's been shocking. And I think it was you, Jack. Didn't I have a conversation with you where I said that I felt I was going to be developing more physical mediumship a while back?
Yeah, you might have.
Yeah, and that's a really funny subject for me, but we'll talk about that. We'll have one dedicated to physical mediumship.
That'd be great.
So that way we can stay on topic tonight.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's an excellent idea. I mean, because again, the more we know, right? The more we educate ourselves, the more we hear about experiences, the more we research those that came before us, you know, the more we'll understand and be able to develop our own mediumship. And it was, like I said, after the Houdini scandal, it really wasn't a scandal. It didn't really affect her at all. And she kind of had, you know, 50% followers and 59% followers when it came to the science aspect of it. But just like science today, you know, in spiritualism and natural law, we start to progress now to quantum physics, right? We start to understand ourselves as continual beings more from a quantum stage. Now, some people will say, oh, but that's pseudoscience, you know, like that's not actual science, you know. And again, it's just going to depend on, you know, where you fall, where your truths are, what you believe. And as she continued to work, and her husband died in 1939, and they continued with seances up until his death. And it was then and only then did she turn to the bottle. But she also was majorly depressed. As ironic and as old as her husband was, they had some sort of bond, and a good one at that. And she didn't really want to live without him. And so when he passed, I'm trying to think, I can't remember what month he passed in, but it wasn't there shortly after. She still continued to have the seances. They didn't mean as much to her. And she started drinking more. And that's where the seances kind of did get out of hand, because she probably shouldn't have been working. We tell you that. Randi, as a teacher, tells her students all the time. You don't feel good, you're not in a good mental space, you're drinking, you're doing drugs, you don't do mediumship, period.
And I tell my students, don't do drugs. No.
Right, exactly. Don't do drugs. Right. But you know, like all of that, like you just don't do it. And she did, but it didn't. I mean, she died, what, 2 years later, I think less than 2 years after her husband did. And probably more because she took to the bottle. And you know, was super depressed. And I don't, you know, I can't blame her. I'm not in her shoes. I've never lost a partner, thank goodness. So I don't know what that's like to go through, you know, that type of loss. And you know, like I said, she did it mainly for her husband. So
well, and think about this too. Not only did she lose a partner, but with what she did and how controversial it was, you know, and everything that surrounded her, that probably compounded it. And it probably put her to live in a very tiny box, so to speak.
Who are we to judge? You know, and if you really look back at a lot of our spiritualist pioneers, especially the women, again, look at the time period. We're not supposed to be independent. We're not supposed to have jobs. We're not supposed to make money. We're not supposed to have a voice, you know? And so I can't even imagine what they went through, the torment, the snickering. Can you imagine walking down the street and being snickered at because of who you are or what you do? You know, and what that told us to you mentally. I mean, at least now we have, I mean, I hope to think we're getting better. And I hope to think that we're being kinder. And I hope to think that we find these great groups that we can be ourselves and express ourselves openly without any concern. But, you know, a lot of our pioneers kind of fell on hard times. We all fall on hard times. And it's sad that they just get defined as the alcoholic medium, when that really wasn't the case. You know, that's why I say, don't just judge a book by what you read on Wikipedia or by its cover. Dig in to the research. And many of Margery Crandon's circles were recorded. And you'll find both. But it's up to you to believe what you want to believe.
Well, and you know why I read all that, right?
Huh.
Because I knew once I saw Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, I knew that it wasn't true. And I knew that you were going to have a field day breaking it all down. Breaking it all down. And I was like, oh, this is going to be so good.
Well, and honestly, I think Houdini, like, again, I think Houdini and his purpose of defrauding some of the mediums was because, again, there is, as much as there is 110% true physical mediumship, there is also fraud. I am not ignorant, you know, and I say, this is why you do your homework. This is why you understand all aspects of mediumship, and you continue to learn, to sit, to observe, and keep your mouth shut after what you've observed. It's not us to expose, it's us to educate. That's Randi, that's what I think you're about. We had the ethics talk because, again, educate yourself. There's, not just the first medium you meet or the first thing you read is the truth. And if something doesn't feel right, it's not right. But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, that's okay.
We do need to educate ourselves because, as we're sitting here talking, I just had a realization, which was when we were talking about physical mediumship. And Tammy, maybe you can relate to this as well. So we've both had our moments. I don't know how they've felt for you, but there were times when I had the moments and I was like, oh, I don't know about this. Why? Because number one, there's not that many people that are practicing physical mediums that are readily available to mentor. And we also hear the scary things like, oh, it could be painful, or the ectoplasm, you could die, or this or that or the other thing. So I feel like we really have to do our education to see where we want to go.
It can be a bit painful depending on the spirit that you're, channeling. And in that way, because my hip actually hurt the rest of that day. And I found out later that she actually fell and had broken her hip. And because I had to know then what this was all about, that everything changed like this. And my voice was very different. But definitely affects your body.
And I feel like there's a lot of us that push back when it comes to physical mediumship because we just don't know enough about it and the things we've heard about it. And I know for me, it's almost like, oh, is this going to be like opening Pandora's box? Because I don't know enough about it.
Yeah. And see, that's where I say, like, here's the thing. I'm an advocate. I am an advocate for physical mediumship because if anything is going to prove the existence of a continuous life is a spirit manifesting itself in full form to a son, manifesting themselves full form to a mother, that the whole room can see, that the whole world can observe, that this person, this son, is continuing. Not that mental mediumship, good evidential mediumship also proves the continuity of life. Absolutely, wholeheartedly. And ultimately, it doesn't matter as long as that mom gets the relief, right? Because who cares if John over here believes or not believes? If the mom believes, the mom gets the message, the mom knows her son lives on. That's what's ultimately most important. But in a scientific approach, physical mediumship would be the way to prove the continuity of life in a physical form. And most physical mediums, and this is why I say most, because when you truly get to understand and experience physical mediumship at its essence, at its core, the only people, Margery worked with her brother. Her brother would never bring her harm or injury. Leslie Flint, right? Phenomenal direct voice medium. Jack Weber, phenomenal physical independent voice and trumpet medium. They only worked with the spirit team, only the highest and best. There's no separation between mental and physical. If you're only working for the highest and the best, that's all you're going to get.
Right. That's what I believe too. I don't believe in like the devil's spirits or the satanic spirits. Okay. I believe that those are what I call mischievous spirits. They're not what they're portraying themselves to be as. And therefore, I don't have the fear of something like that entering my body, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I work only with the highest and the best.
And even in physical mediumship, they don't really enter the body. You know what I mean? They use some of the
It
chemicals
feels like
in
it.
the body.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I just think like, I think Margery just got, to me, she's, oh my gosh. She's to me one of my idols. I have her right over here on my idol wall of people because she was the most scientifically studied. She's like, that's fine, study me. And honestly, she didn't care, whatever you determined, if it was fake or false. And the thing is when you think about this, when you've experienced something outside of yourself, so with your 5 physical senses, that has been kind of random, because spirit can manifest itself physically all the time. Do your lights go on and off? Does your keys get moved? I mean, how do they move the keys, right? They dematerialize them and rematerialize them somewhere else, which is physical mediumship in a way. Again, physical mediumship, though, on a scientific approach, we would all witness the keys dematerialize and materialize in another room. But I still think it's physical mediumship when spirit can still do that. And it's and sometimes it kind of creeps us out. We're like, what was that? You know what I mean? Like, even I, who love it, and I've sat in quite a few physical circles, I am a groupie. When it comes to physical mediums, I will travel the world to sit in a circle. There are times where you're like, oh, I know spirit. Like, we're all mediums. We've all had our experience with spirit. We know that we continue on, but there are sometimes we get a little freaked out by what we see, and our brain, our human brain starts to replay it, and it starts to make it impossible, right? Because if our logical brain can't logic it out, then we just don't believe it's true most of the time. That's why mediums have so much time trusting themselves, because when we allow our logical brain to get in the way, we're always wrong. But if we just allow it to go in the flow, we're good. Oh,
Do you see Jack laughing?
I do. I do. Are you logically? Are you very logical, Jack?
For me?
Yeah.
What am I forever saying to you?
She's muted while she says it out loud.
Stop thinking. I didn't ask you what you thought.
Stop using the logic.
Yeah. And that's what happens. So many people will sit in her circle, sit in Margery Crandon's circle. If it's anything like I've read what some of her circles would be, while I would be in there, I would be all up in it. Like, oh my God, this is so great. And then the next day I'd be sitting like, now, how did that really happen? Well, does that make sense?
That's like when Randy goes, Jack, do you believe that happened? Do you believe what just happened? And I'm like, yes.
Well, but see, I don't sit there and try to figure out how it happened.
No, you just go,
I'm just amazed that it happened. Like, I know how it happened. I fully understand it.
I'm always like, why are you so amazed? Yes, of
Because
course
I'm always amazed. Because I love it. I'm always amazed. It's like being a little kid at Disneyland for the first time. And and the way I feel is, if that wasn't the case, then I don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
Because it should be amazing. It should be wonderful. It should be exciting. And if it's not, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, when physical mediumship has crept in, because of the unknown, it can be a little creepy. Only because of the unknown. And I know that if I left it to myself, I could on my own develop more, but because I don't know, and I don't know what I'm doing, I know that I to some degree block it.
Well, and I don't think, everyone has the ability, but I don't necessarily know if everybody should be. We all, the thing is that I admire about our pioneers. I'll just put this out there because I've been, obviously, how much I love history. And I've been looking through random programs from as early as 1894 to 1930s right now. And what I find in those programs, which we lack now in this diverse world, is they took a form of mediumship. A medium would take a form of mediumship, and that would be their only thing. So you would see advertisements for an inspirational speaker. You'd see advertisements for a trance medium. You would see advertisements for a healer. You would see advertisements for a mental medium. You would see advertisements for a physical medium. They took one of the spokes of mediumship, if you would, and they just focused on that. Where we tend to now as a society focus on all, oh, it's so all amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we get to be, you know, and so I do feel like we have to also, you know, do what you're good at and you love, and then do that. You know, that's, you know, obviously for me, I'm realizing more and more that I might have to just become like a historian or something, because I just love it so much, you know.
The page.
You already are.
Yes.
She is, and that's why I asked her to do these with us, because well, aside from the fact that I love her to pieces, but you know, she's
And
like
she's
a
good at
walking
it.
yeah, she's like a walking encyclopedia with this stuff.
And she's not boring. She's not like blah, 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 blah,
No,
blah.
because she's funny.
Yeah.
But you know, Stace, I think you're right, because I said in a video that I did earlier, or actually I think it was after the video, I said, you know, there's so many things that I would like to do, but there's just not enough time in this lifetime. And being the fact that I already do mediumship and animal communication, it's like, how much more can I put on my plate? How much more?
I think it unfolds. I think you'll find that as you go on in your life, that different things present themselves to you, and that may be the new excitement that draws you that way.
Because
And
when
then-
you started, you did not, when you started educating yourself, you had no intention of teaching, did you?
I had no intention of teaching. I had no intention of doing regular mediumship. I had no intention of doing platform mediumship. My intent was to focus solely on animals. And I will tell you, other things have come to the forefront more than that.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong, that's still a major focus of mine, because animals need to have a voice. But other forms have taken more of a priority.
Right.
Because that's what your purpose is supposed to be.
Well, and don't you think though that when you find that purpose, that's where you put most of your attention? You know, like I think with physical mediums, I know I can't be one. And I don't mean that, I'm not trying to say that I'm limiting myself. As of right now, I want to know more. I want to do more. I don't have the time to focus or commit to the work that physical mediumship takes, you know. So I think that maybe, you know, like what Randi was saying, if you're meant to be, like Tammy said it perfectly, you'll unfold to be. But I think sometimes we can also get caught up in trying to do too much when we don't really have the passion there, you know, just because you can be a really good trance medium and that's all you do is just trance. We don't have to always do it all, because sometimes there's that pressure of, well, but I want, and especially in the beginning, I remember when I found out about all this stuff, I wanted to do it all in 1 week. Like in 1 week, I wanted to know everything, because, you know, nothing feels as spectacular as connecting to spirit, right? Like, don't we all just want to sit there and just be connected? But darn job.
Well, you're better than most, because most of us want to do it in one day. 24 hours, we can have this down.
There's times when I've wanted to be disconnected from spirit.
Sure.
Because spirit's known for taking me and putting me outside my comfort zone in order to make me grow.
I think that's with all of us.
Yeah.
Yes, Lynn.
I just realized that you're saying trance mediumship. I thought you were saying trans mediumship. And I was like, you know, like, what's a tranny medium? I was having trouble. And it's like, I just realized you pronounced it a little bit differently for me. And it was like, oh, yeah, trance.
I know what you were thinking, because me being part of the LGBTQ community, every time I would hear somebody say that, I'd go,
I know. Well, that's what I was feeling. It was like, I love trannies. They're cool, you know. It's like,
got a
Anyway.
lot of good friends.
I just thought I'd share that. It was just like, it struck me
Oh
funny.
my gosh, then
I
that just
realize what you're
makes me
saying
so
now.
happy. Oh my gosh, that's making me laugh. And you know, there's the thing. That's what Margery brought too. One just final note of Margery Crandon is the fact that when you do physical mediumship, most times, again, it's the physical medium and then the spirit team that's working with. Again, it's your team. So it's not going to be anyone that's going to hurt you because they're your team. They're meant for you. Hers was her brother Walter, but her seances and the seances I've been in recently, when it comes to developing physical mediumship, is they need a high vibrational level of energy. So you'll sing fun songs, you'll tell jokes, you'll laugh, because that's what brings the energy up in the room. And I'm telling you, when you start to see stuff floating in and around the room, and you know, and being touched by warm hands that don't exist because we're all holding hands, you know, spirit's creating itself, you do get excited and tell a lot of jokes. So Lynn, I'm going to remember that one the next time I'm in a circle and we need to raise the room. I'll be like, look at the tranny medium instead of trans medium.
Uh-oh.
Randy froze.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh. Well, you're frozen. Oh, there you are. You were frozen like this.
Now Stacy's frozen.
No, she's not.
Oh, well, she is on my screen.
Oh, well, okay.
Hopefully frozen in a good pose. Vogue. Vogue.
Yeah.
Vogue. Vogue.
No, something went on with my speakers. You know, Mercury's in retrograde.
Took me half an hour to get my
Talking
computer to
mediumship.
work tonight. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, Stacy, you just made a very good case. So, what you just told me is that you and Jack have to go because you guys make me laugh too much, and then the physical stuff creeps in. So, both of you got to go.
No, see, we're doing the unfolding for you.
You know what, Jack? You'll always find a way to justify something.
That's what I do.
I always said I should go on a comedy tour. Maybe this is like my
There you
my
go.
venue would be just to do warm-ups for you guys.
There you go. There you go.
It could be the warm up, the medium warm up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I get the vibe up. Woo, woo.
There you go. Say we've got it all planned out.
Like
So,
the comedianship crew.
Oh, I like it.
the thing is we all laugh and we don't even try. That's the funny thing. If we tried, we'd probably not laugh at all.
It sounds
We-
scary, the physical stuff. I mean, to do it. Does it feel scary when you're doing it? I mean, I know it's different, but it
It's
actually,
different.
I mean, it would kind of freak me out to have that happen.
You got two no's and you've got somewhat of a yes right here. And the reason you have somewhat of a yes is I wouldn't say that I don't know how to say it because I don't feel like I'm fearful of it.
Like uneasy.
Yet, yes, because of the different things that I've heard. I think that there's, and this is just my opinion, so don't crucify me, anybody. I think there's some physical mediums out there that try to deter other people from expanding in that area by telling them horror stories. And I've heard those horror stories. So when it does happen to me, I'm not so much like frightened, but yes, uneasy because I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Here we go. Do I really want to go down this road? Because, you know, I'm not educated enough to know if I'm doing it right or wrong.
You know, it kind of reminds me, Randy, of like, you know, Lynn, I want to tell you, it's cautious. It's like driving for NASCAR. Some people want to do it. Other people think I would never drive that fast in my life. It would be ridiculous. You know, like I think it's more about being cautious. You know, I hear what Randy's saying too, though. I have to agree with Randy. I have heard some horror stories come, and I wonder if it's, I wonder why. Is it to make it more dramatic? I don't know, because to me it just seems very natural. Once you understand how it works, it's a very, to me it seems like a very natural process for spirit to kind of be able to manifest itself back into a physical form. However, it's still, you know, I like the word cautious keeps playing over in my head. You know, you just don't go out and drive a dirt bike with never being on it without a helmet. You know, you take precautions and you take time to learn and time to develop before you go on the professional grade Amex dirt bike path, you know. So I think it's more of a process. Does that make sense?
Well,
Or-
logically, wouldn't it be like similar to when, like, for some people, and I don't know, maybe not all people, but you know, when you start to awaken to your spiritual possibilities, that frightens people because they aren't educated about it. So isn't it
Well,
kind of similar to that same kind of feeling as when you're starting to learn about it?
for me, no. And I'll tell you what it is for me, because I can put it in a nice little box, wrap it up, and put a beautiful bow on it for you.
I expect
Okay.
nothing less.
What's that?
I expect nothing less.
Because you'd get nothing less. So with that said, when it's happened to me, now you always hear you shouldn't be doing physical mediumship unless you're in a dark room or a room with a red light or whatever. Oh my God, it's the middle of the day. It's bright and sunny. It's bright and sunny. Oh my God, we got to stop this. We got to stop this. You know, it's that kind of thing.
That's sad.
What's that?
That's sad, actually.
It is because like I said earlier, I know that to some degree I block it. When I'm not being cautious is when it'll creep through.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm A-okay with it. And other times I'm like, oh my God, it's sunny, it's 90 degrees and it's sunny. You know? It's
Well, that's
not
where
dark.
everybody puts their own beliefs on how things have to unfold. When people read that, you know, like the dark room or the red room or whatever, then people get this vision of that's how it's got to be. When we have to realize that everybody unfolds differently in mediumship, and that we can't tell somebody else that this is the way it's going to happen for them, because it's the way it happens for us.
Well,
It's unique to each individual, I believe.
I agree. And the last time that it happened to me, I'm going to say I came to terms with it, but I think coming to terms with it is more of a process than just a realization.
For sure.
That if it wasn't right, it wouldn't be happening.
Right.
And I think as I'm processing through that, it's just going to keep happening more and more. And it'll just do its own progression, because there really aren't a lot of mentors for it.
Can I ask Tammy a question? When
Sure.
you were doing that woman, you know, and had dressed like her or whatever,
Right.
but then started having the physical feelings of the hip and then the voice and everything.
Uh-huh.
How do you feel when that starts happening? I mean, that would be like, you know, like, I don't know, like freaky.
Like I say, spirit moves me out of my comfort zone quite a bit. And it's to the point now that rather than say, oh no, I'm not doing this, it scares me, I just say, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, like, why are you doing this to me? But I know it's you, so here I go. You know,
So you just kind of
it's
go
like
with the
I'm
flow.
open.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He releases in faith.
So
I've
let
been
me
a
ask-
Oh,
medium.
that. Yeah.
I saw my first spirit when I was 10 years old. So I've been seeing this kind of thing happen throughout my life a lot. And it gets more intense as you get older. And it is to the point now where when spirit moves me out of the comfort zone, I don't hesitate. I just say, okay, but you got to be kidding me, right? Why am I going to go ahead and do this? But I do it anyways. So
let me ask you a question, just
sure.
for comparesies.
Mhm.
We're going to comparese right now. So when it happens to me, it almost feels like my head is in a cloud.
You definitely feel disassociated.
Yeah, like almost like you're outside of your body.
That's what I was
Exactly.
gonna ask.
Right.
It was almost like an out of body kind of thing. Like
It
That's-
is.
That's
you
what
guys
it feels
are out
like
here
to me.
watching your body do stuff.
Right, exactly. Well, you're feeling your body doing something that it's not normally doing. And but it's also like you're watching it happen. So it's
'Cause
like
it's
you're
not really you.
disassociated or outside of your body at the time.
Well, one of the times it happened to me, I had said something. I was doing a reading and I said something. And somebody turned to me and said, "Why did you say that?" And not
Right.
that I said anything wrong, I didn't, but it was like, why did
It was
you
the
know?
way you said it, and it related to them somehow, right?
And it snapped me right out of it. And I looked at them. I said, "What are you talking about?" I had no
Right.
clue what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue what they were
Right.
talking about. I didn't even know what I had said.
So again, my inquisitive, constant knowledge mind is
Mhm.
that because you are all what you're all experience is trance. That's what trance is. Do you know?
Mm-hmm.
Physical moves when it starts to just to be. I know trance. I'm making sure that I'm trying to enunciate more correctly.
I know, it's just the way I hear it. It's so funny.
So trance mediumship isn't physical mediumship. Don't
Right.
trance, and then there's physical, but you usually do some altered state of consciousness to shift into the physical. But what Tammy and what Randi are talking about, to me, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's trance. Good job, guys. Like, yay. Because that's everything that I know about it, is that's exactly it, and it's kind of normal to feel that, especially in the beginning, until you develop a better working relationship with who you're working with, like for Tammy, that woman, or Randi, who knows who you're working with.
Oh, I've had cases where it was somebody that had a bad back and like I couldn't move.
Right.
I couldn't move my body. I've had some strange things happen, but yeah, and I agree. A lot of that is trance because we're not working with the ectoplasm necessarily yet. And like I said, I know that to some degree I block it. And I'm working on that process because I know that, they're there and they're taking care of me. And if it wasn't okay, it wouldn't be happening.
Right.
I love that.
But you have to get the things you've heard out of here.
Yeah.
You have to process through what you've heard here and get that dealt with before, even though you have the realization that it wouldn't be happening if it wasn't okay, you still have to go through the process of dealing with this that you've been told and you've heard, and the uneasiness that surrounds it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, again, really studying our pioneers, so many of them were physical mediums. Maybe we'll do the Bang sisters, who did precipitated art, and the Campbell's brothers. Both of them were considered physical mediums. They did, I mean, literally pictures would just appear on a piece of paper of people's loved ones. It was phenomenal. Still studied to this day, still can't figure out a way to prove it. Like, still can't reproduce it. They don't understand. Yeah.
Let's do the Bang sisters next.
Okay. Well, we'll do the Bang sisters and the Campbell brothers, even though they weren't really brothers, but we'll talk about that.
But are they from the same state?
Bang sisters. Well, they had the Bang and the Campbell brothers both had a house in Lilydale, but I think the Bang sisters were from Chicago, Illinois. I don't think we've done Illinois yet.
Right. And where were the brothers from?
I don't know prior to Lilydale. I'd have to figure out.
If they weren't from the same state, we can't do them together.
Oh no, we have to do them separate.
Yeah, we have to because we have to do the different states.
Yeah, we have Massachusetts fun now.
I'm gonna get a map so that we can color them in as we go.
As we go, that's good.
You do that, Jack.
And if you ever, you know, maybe we can plan a physical talk, because I think it would really, the more you know, then like Randy, just what you were saying, you know, you got to get it through here. So, you know, to counter some of the maybe uncertain things you've heard or the scary things you heard, I can give you a counter by giving you guys a bunch of really great positive things.
Like, I'm afraid to start coughing up crystals.
I wish I
Okay.
could cough up crystals.
Yeah, you know, like I don't want to be apporting things. You
Okay, well, you don't have to apport things if you don't want to. I'll tell you can I tell you my one positive story of a physical circle that I got to experience?
Sure.
So I was sitting in a physical circle, things were flying, things were, apporting, and it was all fantastic. But the best part of that physical circle was towards the end, when independent voice, so if you can imagine a kind of hearing a voice in the corner of a room, just, you know, it's not coming from the cabinet where the medium's sitting, it's not coming from anybody in the circle, it's a voice kind of just floating on the ceiling. I get all teary when I say this, because to me this is the best proof positive of the continuity of life. We were all just sitting, it was pretty quiet, and we heard a boy say, "Hi, Dad." And you could hear this man that's sitting in the circle, we're all strangers, we don't know each other, kind of go like that. And then the voice goes, "Where's Mom? I can't believe she wouldn't come to this." "Oh, that's right, she's out with Aunt Cindy having a margarita." So already knew where his mom was. And he says, "Yeah, that's right, son." And I got to witness a 5-minute conversation between a father and a son. It was phenomenal. It was the best. There wasn't a dry eye in the circle. We were all sobbing. He knew everything that the dad had been doing since the 1.5 years he transitioned to the spirit world. The son got to tell the dad all the people he got to meet, family that the dad didn't even remember. Right? But just all of this continuity happening. And we're all crying, the circle's all over, we're all standing outside. And the dad says to a bunch of us, "Listen to this." And it was the last voicemail that he had recorded before his son passed away the next day. And it was the exact same voice we heard in the room.
Look, I don't smoke. Can I have a cigarette?
I got God bumps. My whole body's God bumps right now.
I don't smoke, but I
It's
think
the
I need a
truth.
cigarette.
It was so good, you know, and I think to myself, that physical mediumship will take the most naysayer and turn them into a believer, because I don't know how you can deny that.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think with that, we should probably wrap up. What do you think?
I don't have a yay, Margie.
Hey, Kathy.
After we're done, I need to talk to Stace and Jack.
Alrighty.
So you guys don't go anywhere.
Okay.
All right.
Swim's been
Thank-
listening while she's been packing.
What? Who's that? What?
Kathy Swim.
Oh, nice. Hi, Kath. How you doing, baby?
She said it had been so interesting. Thanks for the information.
Oh, anytime. I hope wherever you're going that you're having a safe trip.
I forget where she said she was going.
I forgot to. All right, so we'll wrap it up. And
All right, thank you.
thanks for watching. Don't forget to go to YouTube to Randy Sands page and subscribe and hit the bell so when new content comes out, you get notified. And
Wisconsin.
what's that?
She's going to Wisconsin to see Stacy,
Oh, that's right.
right?
And Stacy, you didn't even say anything. You're sitting there like the cat that ate the canary.
Uh-huh. I
She
know.
wants a hug.
Stacy.
Heather in person.
Yeah, she wants a hug, by the way.
Oh, yay.
So with that, we'll close up. And like I said, remember to go to Randy Sands and the Mediumship Crew on YouTube. Hit subscribe and the bell so that way you get notified of new content. And may you all have an absolutely amazing week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, good people.
And then I'll make my hand dematerialize. Oh,
Stacy's practicing physical mediumship.